Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the Future of Teaching Starts Today. We are so glad you are here for what I know will be an important and timely conversation. Across the country, we're seeing the effects of persistent teacher shortages in very real ways on schools, on classrooms, and most importantly, students. At the same time, there's growing momentum around new ideas, new pathways, and new partnerships that can help us build a stronger, more sustainable education workforce. Today, we're going to explore both sides of that reality, what's challenging us, what's working, and what it will take to move forward with intention. I want to start by thanking our panelists for being here and for the roles you each play in this work. You represent different perspectives across the ecosystem, from classrooms to school systems to philanthropy to innovation. And that's exactly what this moment calls for. It's going to take all of us working together to meaningfully strengthen the educator pipeline. At Breakthrough, this is work we've been deeply committed to for nearly 50 years. We've long believed that students thrive when they are surrounded by strong, supportive relationships, and that those relationships are at the heart of great teaching and learning. At the same time, we've worked to create clear, accessible pathways into the profession, especially for those who have been historically underrepresented in teaching. The needs of our schools and students have evolved over time, and they continue to evolve. But our core belief hasn't changed. If we want to build a stronger future for education, we have to invest in people, we have to invest in relationships, and we have to be intentional about how we develop and support the next generation of educators. This is why this conversation is so important. So with that, I'm excited to turn it over to our moderator, Angie Wedlick, Breakthrough's Chief Program Officer, who brings both deep experience and a real passion for this work. Thank you, Angie.
Thank you, Vince. I also want to share my gratitude for our panelists and for you all being here today, sharing your voices and representing ideas from across the world of education and the spaces where we really are thinking deeply about teacher recruitment, teacher training, and early career support. As a former teacher, I have a very deep respect and a ton of love for this profession and for all of the people who support it, who take it on, who dig deeply into it. It is a beautiful and sometimes messy world for teaching and learning. And so I am excited for today's conversation and what it will bring to our spaces as food for thought. So for today's conversation, we'll have dedicated questions that I'll ask each of you individually. And I want this to be a true conversation, though. So if there's any burning insights that you want to share beyond those of the specific questions, please feel free to join in. We'll spend about 35 minutes together here, and then we'll open it up for some Q&A in a broad sort of open space, and we will get started from there. So I'd love to invite you all to join me. Sharing your name, your role, and your organization, and one thing that's really giving you energy right now in your work. And we can start with my wonderful friend from way back in the day, Lindsey.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsey Lorehn, and I am a school design partner with Transcend Education. In terms of things that are bringing me joy in the work, just a couple weeks ago, I was in Meridian, Mississippi, working with a group of teachers and leaders who are focused on well-being and what it means to support the whole child. And to see not only teachers being very intentional about how they welcome students in the day, but also them leading the charge and bringing their colleagues along with them in terms of a teacher-driven change really has me energized and inspired.
Nithin Iyengar. I'm the managing director of the Give Forward Foundation of Philanthropy in the Bay Area. And I'd say what's energizing me is the growing turn towards optimism in K-12. For a while, it has felt like K-12 has been dominated by scarcity, zero-sum thinking, pessimism, but I'm energized by an increased focus on what's possible and what's showing promise. And so statewide gains in Mississippi, Tennessee, Louisiana, teachers doing absolutely phenomenal work in classrooms, leveraging emergent technology, increase ways that schools have permeable boundaries with their communities. I can go on, but the optimism grounded in real examples is what's energizing me.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sue-Lin Toussaint. I'm the Executive Director of School Performance in Aurora Public Schools, which is right outside of Denver, Colorado. What is definitely energizing me these days is I work at the central office of a major school district. We have about 40,000 students, and we're working very intentionally to break down silos and work together in service to schools in a way that is really unprecedented. And thinking about these very great challenges in education as everyone's challenge, right? We may take different roles and different positions around solving these issues, but coming together to collaborate in service to students has been exciting.
Hi everyone, I'm Zaniya Harrison. I am a sixth grade science teacher at Phillips Academy Charter School, as well as a 2025 TFA Teach for America core member. Something that excites me in this role as a sixth grade science teacher is the fact that there's a lot of possibility. There's a lot of possibility out there in this profession to really progress and move forward. And a lot of room for change and the freedom that I have in my classroom, that's really what excites me in this profession, that I have the freedom. And most importantly, I can't forget that I am a Breakthrough New York 2024 alum. So I'm very, very, very thankful to be here today.
Thank you, everyone. Gosh, if that's like the best way to start off, I'm going to watch this recording back at the beginning of all of my days. It is such a beautiful space to think about, like, teacher well-being, to think about optimism, possibility. I love this idea of freedom, Zaniya, that you talk about, like space to really create and focus on the students who are in front of you and breaking down the silos, to do that in collaboration and connection with others, which I think is a great framing for where we're going to go today. And I also think it's important for us, at times to recognize what is happening, right? Even in there's this like reality of our world, and the space of teaching and learning that is tough sometimes. And we're seeing certain things that we want to acknowledge, because then acknowledging them allows us to open up that space of hope, and optimism and promise. So let's start there. Sue-Lin, would you share with us, from where you sit, what are the most pressing challenges in really recruiting and preparing and retaining teachers right now? Where are you seeing some of the biggest gaps?
Sure. So when we think about recruitment, I live in the Denver metro area. Things are getting increasingly more expensive here. So even recruiting from out of state has been challenging. We've had situations where we've hired teachers who then moved here and couldn't find housing and could not take teaching jobs here. We also see some significant gaps in special education, as well as middle school. Those are some of our areas of the greatest need. I also think in terms of preparation, we have to remember that we have an increasing number of folks who are coming into the profession from non-traditional pathways. So even my own daughter got an alternative license recently. And to watch her, who did not have any classroom experience, didn't have any student teaching experience, to watch her navigate all of the acronyms in education. I was really grateful. She had a great support system at the school where she taught. But sometimes those of us from a more traditional pathway, we forget like how much there is culturally, like in education, that for somebody from the outside, like they don't necessarily understand all the nuances of those things. So I feel like our preparation programs need to be very, very comprehensive and not make any assumption about what people know about classroom teaching. One thing that we've seen some success with in Aurora as it relates to retention is we work really hard to ensure that teachers have support systems at their schools, right? In the space of having mentors assigned to them, building strong relationships with their grade level teams. We also have affinity groups that new teachers and all educators, actually, not just teachers, but we have affinity groups that people can join. I'm a big believer that what keeps people in not only education, but in professions in general are relationship. People have to feel a sense of belonging. They have to feel connected. They have to feel like this is a place I want to go, both because I feel like I'm making an impact, but also like I have people horizontally who I connect with that I'm doing the work with. So I think that all of those things are very important.
Yeah, thank you so much. Zaniya, does that reflect with your experience entering the classroom?
1,000% yes. I would definitely. I'm nodding because yeah, everything she said was pretty much spot on. For someone, there's a stark difference between me and my other colleagues, the ones who are telling me like I'm returning my second year. Thankfully, I'm very blessed to say I've received a contract to return for year 2, and I proudly accepted it. And I was like, yeah, like I'm ready. But compared to some of my colleagues who were like, yeah, no, like I don't know if I'm returning for year 1, and that difference really is the adjustment, right? Especially as a Teach for America core member, a lot of us are in these unconventional career paths. And I'm, well, educational backgrounds, you would say, where a lot of us are fresh out of college. We're literally like, okay, we have some type of inkling that gives you, yes, I want to do teaching. Let me try it, right? That's a great program for that. Programs like Breakthrough definitely allowed me to see, yes, like I like teaching. After that experience, I was able to see I love teaching. I actually think I can be good at this. Like it empowered me to do so, right? It was that experience, that realistic experience of 6 weeks where you're doing X, Y, and Z that prepped me to know I'm going to have hardships, but I'm also going to have great days as well, a part of this career. But for other TFA core members who had like maybe a camp experience, right? Which is different than a breakthrough experience. Yes, you worked with kids, but your background as a camp counselor is definitely different than my background of someone who actually had an immersive 6-week experience in a class. And I think a lot of people are kind of finding themselves in that kind of split where you weren't prepared to know all of these things. You weren't really prepared to understand. You had to learn this code and that code, and be willing to the flexibility, be willing for the change that happens in the classroom and the world of education. You're not going to have the cookie cutter experience that you would hope for in other careers as opposed to education. And a lot of times that kind of separates the two, of a teacher who's excited like me to return for year 2 opposed to another who is now burnt out, was like, yeah, no, I'm ready to jump ship and pursue another career. Because teaching wasn't my first pick, right? Teaching was an option for me to kind of explore and go on. But ideally, I have a dream career that's waiting on the back end, right? But for someone like me who got reassured by this experience after another, who felt the sense of community at my school, right? I'm blessed to say I have a strong support system as well, where my vice principal and me are really, really close. Like we're talking about concerts. What did you do this weekend, right? And that's crazy. Like my vice principal and me are at this level. With the students, right? I built a community there with them. Like I genuinely love them. I branched out and made new coworkers. Like having that sense of community made my experience different compared to others, right? Who are kind of having more hardships with admin, right? It's totally different. And I feel like Sue-Lin touched on that perfectly, right? That community aspect, that relationship is what's needed, as well as teachers understanding the world. Teaching is flexible. You have to be willing to adapt on the spot. And if you're not willing to, then unfortunately it's not it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It is an interesting like push pull, right? It's like the relationships and the joy. And then there's this real need to be like in your craft and understand how it's difficult and how you have to flex. And the warm up to that is really helpful to have before you get there. And then you realize, wow, this wasn't quite for me. I really appreciate that. Lindsey, where do you see systems struggling to maybe respond effectively in these moments of teacher recruiting and preparing and retaining?
Yeah, I think about just like the teacher role itself. Our teachers are stretched thin, and it feels like their roles are just ever expanding. You know, teachers hold the academic growth that their students need as like, you know, core to their role, but they're also supporting student well-being. They're meeting a diverse need, the needs of our diverse learners and diverse learners in all different aspects. And they're holding so much. And they also have to absorb so much change. So when you're thinking about changes that happen with the tides of changing of school leadership, district leadership, state changes, new initiatives, it's like the teachers, are the ones who are having to manage that impact and figure out how to move forward in the best way for their kids. And so I think, you know, when we have our teachers in a place where they're consistently having to receive top-down changes that aren't necessarily grounded in community context, that where teachers are not brought to the table, it makes it hard for them to be able to manage what already is an incredible but deeply complex and important role. So I think this idea of like, what does it mean as changes are happening, as innovation is happening, as we're shifting and changing on the school level, the system level, the state level, and even the national level? Like, how do we actually listen to the people most impacted by the changes? That's families, that's students, and that's most certainly teachers.
Thanks, Lindsey. Okay, Zaniya, I'm going to ask this one. You touched on this a little bit, but as a first year teacher, you've wrapped up, you know, getting toward the end of that first year. What's been the most surprising about the transition into the classroom, even with that lead up experience? And what support has made the biggest difference for you this year?
I would say the most surprising thing is just the reality that as much as you may try and put in your all, something just won't work. And that's okay. I think as someone who kind of fears failing in life, right? This job is very humbling. It shows you, right? You can plan the most perfect, well-crafted, minute to minute, beautiful lesson in your head, right? But then when you get to the reality of teaching in front of students and having to deal with behavior issues, right? And just the moods, right? I'm a teacher who care about social and emotional well-being for my students, right? So I can't move forward in my lesson if I feel a clear sense that something's wrong with my class, right? So then that takes out of the day, right? Just dealing with all of the ups and downs and still have to put on a show. I think that's the most surprising thing about it, right? You're just meant to roll with the punches. I knew that already, right? But just knowing like you may try to plan everything to the T, but ultimately you have to roll with the punches and be okay, like knowing you tried your best. I'm very grateful that my mentor, especially, like she's very, very helpful, like relax some, take a beat, like you're good, right? And it's having that support and as well as having my colleagues hold me accountable, like, Z, like you're doing your thing, you're doing it, right? Even if you may not feel like it, right? Please know that we see you, right? And we appreciate you. I tackled on a science, bringing a science, like a science kind of competition to my school for the first time this year, like taking them to a competition. Little do I know, I would just randomly be spearheaded something, but just for the passion of it, right? But just dealing with like, oh, you can say something and it actually gets done, right? And I'm grateful that my school is one of those that's kind of taking that feedback and listening, like, hey, they're supporting me. So it's having that support that makes it kind of amazing to continue on because I'm not being shut down. They're listening. So that having that support makes the journey easier. And I would definitely say that.
Yeah. I also am smiling because those of us who have been classroom teachers, I watched all of our faces when you said this job is humbling. All of us went, yes, that is so true. It is a place where you have access to this like beautiful world that will then set you right when it needs to. Kids are good that way. And it's what makes it beautiful too. Sue-Lin, what does this make you guys think about in terms of what systems might need to change or what might they do differently based on what you hear here from Zaniya?
First of all, it's such a joy to hear Zaniya talk about that. Just recently, I'm a big journaler. So for years, decades, I've been writing in journals. And I found the journal where I transitioned into my first year of teaching. And it was hysterical, right? Like I had quotes in there written down of funny things kids said to me, you know, times where you had a really hard day and you weren't sure if you could do this, right? So like just hearing from her just brings such a smile to my face. Like it's really a delight. Like as challenging as teaching is, it has been the greatest delight of my life. When I hear from her, I think about autonomy, right? I think about there are places where we really should not be debating, right? Kids need to learn so that they can master grade level standards. They need access to grade level work, right? Like there are some things that are not up for debate, but then there is all this beautiful autonomy around providing learning experiences for kids. What Zaniya mentioned about spearheading this competition, right? That's a learning experience for kids, right? It's not just an extracurricular. It might be the most powerful thing they take from sixth grade science for the rest of their life, right? So I think about like, yes, there are some things that are pretty set. And then where is the autonomy where we can allow space for people's creativity to really blossom?
Yeah, thank you. Nithin, where do you see this in terms of how we shape where investments might go?
Yeah. I want to elevate something I think Lindsey said a bit ago and ties to what Zaniya said. I mean, yes, being a first year teacher is wildly humbling. And I'd note that now is the most difficult time to be a teacher, given all that teachers had to do. And Lindsey alluded to it, instructional challenges, political challenges, learning loss from the after impacts of the pandemic, et cetera. My first year in the classroom was wildly humbled, and I'm just like humbled even thinking about what it takes to thrive as a teacher today. But the biggest difference, and I think this is echoed in a number of things, is it's support that is ongoing and practical. And it is mentoring, coaching, help with day-to-day instructional decisions. The number of choices that a first-year teacher or even multiple years in the classroom early in the tenure has to deal with is not solved by like think it's both thinking about longer term decisions, but it's also what is practical that I can use in my classroom tomorrow. And so it is not just instructional systems that make routines, planning, classroom management easier, but also emotional support. The other thing which folks talked about is there are real financial barriers both to getting into the profession and thriving in the profession. And so the cost of high quality preparation programs is not cheap, and finding housing is also a challenge. Um, and so when thinking about investments, I'd say it's a focus on people and systems, not one-off products. And so that means funding mentor teachers, coaching time, new teacher cohorts, onboarding, and really those efforts that provide protected time to learn routines that you can use tomorrow in your classroom. But also, there is a lot of momentum around developing tools, technology, and both funding and supporting tools for teachers. And one of the things I'm shocked by is many of those tools don't follow a simple standard, which is obviously A, does it improve student outcomes, but B, does it make the job of a teacher easier? And so if you are out there developing a tool or funding a tool, the standard is certainly is it improving outcomes, but is it making the job of what a teacher is doing easier? And the only way to find that out is by talking to and seeking input from teachers in the design of these tools. And so happy to share more about these and what this looks like. The other thing I just note is those things that are outside of the classroom, such as the cost of teacher prep or housing, they are solvable by both public and private investments. And so in California, the Golden State Teacher Grants have provided a huge tool for many teachers to afford the cost of high quality residencies, and there are multiple efforts in the Bay Area to address housing. One most recent is the Oakland Fund for Public Education has bought an apartment building and is converting that now to affordable teacher housing. And so many of these efforts are feasible, possible with both public and philanthropic funding.
Thank you so much. We talk a lot, at Breakthrough about what is the investment we're making in people, right? Our design isn't a thing. It is the relationships, the dynamics, the sort of how we support and think through the experiences that you're having. So it feels very affirming to hear that. And also a push around how do we establish partnerships broadly that will help with the financial implications of this profession, whether that's teacher pathways, whether that's housing, et cetera. So really do appreciate that. Lindsey, so along those lines about what we're funding, what do you also see that's really working when it comes to retaining and supporting teachers, especially teachers from diverse backgrounds?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we're seeing is schools and school systems who know that what's currently happening isn't working and using this to rethink the teaching role. And part of that is being as intentional as they are with the student experience with the adult experience. So really like attending to and designing an adult experience that is supportive, collaborative. And some of the most innovative schools or models we see are ones that there's an interconnectedness between how students experience school and how adults experience the school and the professional setting. So an example at Transcend, we have the whole child model, which is focused on students' well-being and students having the tools and the practices to feel regulated and to feel connected. And we start that work with really thinking about adult well-being. What are the practices adults need so that they are whole, that they're regulated, that they feel connected to each other? Because we believe like regulated, connected adults help support regulated, connected children so that students can learn and thrive. Another example is there's an innovative secondary school in Fresno called the Center for Advanced Research and Technology, called CART. And it is a school that has career-focused labs that the students experience interdisciplinary projects and in teams, that they work a lot with teams. And on the adult experience, they do team teaching in interdisciplinary teams so that the teachers are learning from each other, they're building projects together, and that allows kids to see a model for what effective team teaching looks like. And then I think to what we've talked about before, like it moves teaching away from the isolation of like, I'm closing my classroom door and just focusing on my work, to like this whole experience for kids, we're co-creating together and we're learning and growing together. And I think there's just like a piece too of like just like honoring like teachers as professionals. And we talked about autonomy, and Zaniya, you having the autonomy even as a first year teacher. Nithin, you talked about this idea of like talking to teachers. Like our teachers should be at the table for decision making and shaping the path towards change and innovation. What that looks like for us at Transcend is any sort of innovation or change work we do it in design teams that consist of leaders, but also consist of teachers. So together we are hearing from teachers to understand what it would look like, how to vision set what they want to be true, and then implementing that there.
Thanks, Lindsey. It really is exciting to hear how people are really thinking deeply about the experience of teaching and learning. So I appreciate you bringing us into that. Zaniya, what pathways made teaching accessible to you? Like along the lines of what Lindsey is talking about, like where are the spaces where you're like, this was the thing that really made me latch on?
I would say my experience as a coach not after college, after high school, I came back to my old high school and I decided to be a dance coach there. So between being a dance coach during my time in college as well as being a tutor, I signed up for the Teach for America Ignite Fellowship, which is a tutoring platform. So between those two experiences, that's how I knew, okay, like I really love working with the youth. Like somehow, some way, like I'm connecting with each and every student I meet. Like I have like a wonderful experience, right? Like I'm able to make an impact, they have an impact in my life. Like, okay, this feels right. I was going in corporate for a little, did experiences in that realm, and then my heart wasn't there. And I'm like, if I'm gonna do something, I need to feel it. I need to have a passion for it. I'd rather do hard work rather than be burnt out in life. So I chose the heart over the money, as people like to say, right? So I was like, okay, cool. After that experience, one of my mentors, she connected me with Breakthrough. She was like, okay, perfect. The summer, like junior year summer, I was like, yeah, like let me try this. Let me try this out, before I go into my senior year. I reach out to my mentor saying, I want a summer fellowship that's paid, is giving me hands-on experience. Like, okay, do you have any options? Boom. She's like, I have the perfect one for you, breakthrough. I'm like, okay, what's this? I read it. I'm like, yeah, like this is literally my dreams. The universe is powerful. Like this power in the word. So everything I could have wanted, I received in breakthrough. So that breakthrough summer fully solidified, like this is it for me. And then breakthrough was connected to TFA somehow, right? One day they was like, TFA is coming to talk about the core. I'm like, oh, okay, whatever, I had brushed it off initially because of so many mixed reviews you hear out there, like, none of this. But come to find out, my world is so connected because a lot of my teachers that I looked up to and staff members are connected and they're core members. So it was almost like I was following in their footsteps after hearing firsthand about the core. It was like, yeah, this is the perfect way. I'm graduating not with a teaching degree. I graduated from New Jersey Institute of Technology with my Bachelor of Science in Science, Technology, and Society. So definitely not teaching, right? So I'm like, this is a perfect way to transition into it, still get the support that I need as a first-year teacher. It helps as well pay for my master's program and get my certificate, like my actual teaching license. So boom, it was a no-brainer. Like this is the route for me. And it all started small, and just saying yes to opportunities led me to this.
Yeah. Thanks, Zaniya. It does speak to the power, I think, of partnerships, whether that's between organizations or whether that's like across school districts and school design and teacher preparation programs and philanthropy. So I think that continues. That theme makes my whole heart happy and it continues to resonate. But also, I think, Lindsey, what you were saying, which is the partnerships that teachers make with one another when they're in the classroom, right? Which is like, hey, if I can team teach and we design this together, there's such a power in that and a beauty to that. I love this. Sue-Lin, if you were adding on to this, what approaches do you think schools could adopt more widely now? And which ones are going to need some time to develop and cross over to large, systems?
I think that's a great question. First of all, I so resonate with Zaniya's story because I did not go into college thinking I was going into education. And it was almost like through exposure that I learned, oh, I really do like teaching. Oh, I really do like kids, right? And then really it was through Breakthrough, which at the time was called Summer Bridge, that I cemented that decision. Like, no, I really do like this. It's like, this is something I want to do. So it just makes me think about how do we provide ever increasing opportunities for people to be exposed, right? I had a conversation with a parent recently who participated on a principal selection team who said, oh my gosh, I love schools. Like I'm rethinking everything. Like how, right? The process was not set up for that, but he felt so energized by the process that he was literally thinking, well, maybe schools, right? So sometimes I think we underestimate, like people are looking for fulfillment. And that's really what I heard from Zaniya's story, definitely resonated with me. We have coaches, we have after-school providers, we have people who are engaging with teaching and learning and engaging with students in these periphery ways. And like any good parent will tell you, a good thing requires a little bit of a push. So I think even asking the question, right? Like, are you interested in becoming a teacher? I have definitely done it with my own two, right? And I'm still working on the second one. The first one I got teaching, the second one I'm working on, right? But both of them are interested in service, interested in community service. Like that's often like how you get connected. I would love to see public school systems connect more with programming that can provide support for both high school students and college students who are even like thinking, maybe I'm involved in some of these adjacent places and I would like to see myself explore this more and perhaps become a classroom teacher. And actually, I think that's how we increase a lot of participation, particularly for BIPOC educators.
Thank you so much. Okay, Nithin, this one's for you. From a funding standpoint, where do you see the greatest opportunity to move the needle right now in terms of the teacher pipeline?
Yeah. I mean, I'll just cap that and say, I think any funder who's thinking about supporting any part of the teacher pipeline, please fund, period. More money is better. I'd say though, the biggest opportunity is to fund the parts of the pipeline that keep people in teaching once they arrive. And so the goal is, how do you fund efforts that not just increase the number of teachers, but increase the number of teachers who are staying in the profession? So things like paid residencies, strong induction, mentoring, working conditions that increase burnout, high quality professional learning, etc. Research and a bunch of district examples point to these type of things that are really high leverage investments. And there is like clear research on the cost of replacing a teacher versus the cost of developing a teacher, and the ROI to keep an effective teacher in the classroom is clearly worth it. One observation is just that the quality of professional learning that teachers receive today is just far below what's needed. But when you see schools and see efforts that are driven by high quality professional learning, it is a fundamentally different experience for students, and it's a fundamentally different experience for teachers. And so those investments to strengthen what teachers experience in classrooms matter. And it's also the best efforts are those efforts that really structure systems so that they actually work for teachers, not just at classroom level. As I also mentioned previously, this is a philanthropic priority, but also a public funding priority. So there are a number of examples to point to that when public systems make substantial investments in teacher pipeline efforts and they're well designed, it yields amazing results. So the Golden State Teacher Grants in California significantly increase the number of teachers in diverse backgrounds and have been used to defray the costs of high quality residencies. Mississippi's investments in teacher coaching to drive implementation of evidence-based literacy are a key driver in statewide gains. And one thing I'll leave with is, Angie, I appreciate the question was, what matters to move the needle right now? An equally important question, though, is what matters to move the needle for a teaching profession that we can't yet imagine. And I'm excited to continue learning what it looks like to answer that question in tandem with what it looks like to move the needle on outcomes today.
Yep. That's fantastic. Thank you. Lindsey, where are you seeing systems ready or maybe not ready to absorb a large investment, right? Like you have to be almost ready to go to absorb that investment.
Yeah, I think in terms of maybe not readiness, or maybe there's pockets of readiness, is this idea that generally kind of you talk to teachers across, you know, the state, the nation, and they all have pretty much the same experience. Like there's a new curriculum, there's a new hot thing, there's a new program, you know, and I'm told, or I'm, you know, sit down in a training and then I have to implement it all starting tomorrow and without kind of that high quality support. And I'm kind of sitting with what Zaniya, you said around this idea of like it's teaching and learning is failing and learning through the failing and through the risk taking and testing new ideas. And so I think, you know, the pressure that we have in terms of like we're going to implement change in a full scale way right away really causes a lot of system and people burnout more than moving towards a place where we're investing in learning and investing in trying something out, seeing what works and what doesn't, and then iterating on it, and then using it to then have bigger and bigger scale, allowing that so that teachers can figure out what works, can bring their colleagues along the way, and ultimately get the support they need versus feeling like they're kind of in this kind of whiplash of change. And so, you know, at Transcend, we like to think about what does this look like to do this in a community-based way? How do we test ideas first before going full scale, and thinking about it as how do we go slow to ultimately go far for long-term and sustainable results.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to say, I have a former mentor who used to say, go slow to go fast. And I was like, oh, I think of her now in this moment. And that resonates deeply with that. So, okay, We have maybe just a few more questions, but before we close this sort of funding and opportunity lane, Sue-Lin, I'd love to hear if you had the resources that you needed. So it's sort of the magic wand of resources, right? What would you tackle first?
I think there would be a lot of things to tackle. So I am going to focus on like what I think is the most important, which is really around preparation. So you get somebody in the door, like how do you provide them such strong support and multifaceted support to keep them in the work? And then you don't have to continuously work on recruitment, right? I do believe that when people are given the right levels of support, that they stay, right? I do agree with what Lindsey said, though, in terms of like the change management around a lot of change that happens in the system. And to what degree do people feel like things are happening with them versus to them? I think that makes a huge difference. But I would multiply layers of support for preparation.
Thank you. Okay, so I like a little rapid round as we get ready to close out. When we get this right, not if, but when we get this right, I'm gonna use that Zaniya, that like put it out in the space, right? When we get this right, what changes for students and what does it mean for teaching? And I'm gonna ask each of you to go, but I'll give you a minute to think about it. When we get this right, what changes for students and what does it mean for teaching? And who would like to go first? I feel like I put you on the spot. Go for it, Sue-Lin.
I would say new and more sustainable solutions to old problems.
Thank you. Go for it, Zaniya.
I would say just a wholehearted experience. When you think about it, for both the teacher and the student, right? We walk out feeling like, yeah, like I had an effective day, you had an effective day, I'm not burnt out, you're not burnt out. That's what it looks like.
Um, it's a great, I'll be a bit dramatic here, which is when we neglect or when we don't focus on what matters for kids, it opens the door to fear, exclusion, authoritarian tendencies. But when we do what's right, we strengthen the foundation of a thriving democracy.
That's a really hard one to follow. I think more, I think kind of big picture. I think if we get this right, our teachers thrive and they stay. And as a parent of a second grader in public school, like a thriving teacher, like leads to thriving kids. And yeah, so I think when teachers thrive, our kids thrive.
Thank you. Again, just a huge amount of gratitude. It really is so important to have these conversations and to have the diversity of thinking across the board and experiences and roles and spaces to get to talk about this. I do think it hits home this idea that we are better together in a collective space, pushing forward on ideas and pushing back on the spaces where we still have questions and asking around. Lindsey, this like idea of test iterate, like how do we really get at the crux of it? Whose voices are we getting to hear, and how is that impacting the decisions we're making in terms of the teaching and learning in the professional development that we build, and also how it is delivered, right? Because you can have a really great lesson. I think you said this earlier, Zaniya, and you can stand there and then go, this did not go as planned. And so it really matters that we're thinking holistically about this and the both and of the opportunity for both teachers and students, and really then how that translates to a better world for all of us. And so it is just with deep gratitude that I got to spend time with you all today. I'd love to invite Vince back. He's going to close us out, but again, just a lot of gratitude from us here at Breakthrough.
Yes, I echo Angie's gratitude and thank you all so much our incredible panelists, Nithin, Lindsey, Sue-Lin, and Zaniya. I mean, Zaniya, you really brought it home for us. Thank you for sharing your expertise and insight today, and thanks to everyone for watching and participating. We're glad that you could join in this conversation. The work we do at Breakthrough is not done alone. It takes educators, alumni, partners, and communities working together to expand opportunities for young people. When we collaborate across sectors, we can create meaningful, lasting impact for students and the field of education. So we hope that today's conversation inspires you to stay connected, share these ideas, and continue engaging with Breakthrough. So take a moment, visit our website, follow us on LinkedIn, and join us in advancing our mission. Thank you again for being a part of this conversation. We're excited about what comes next as we work together to expand opportunities for young people to grow as learners, educators, and leaders. Thank you, everyone. Good night.